Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen. And my guest today is Anna Vocino, who has a wonderful background and life experiences and has just expanded into a lot of different areas and all in health and wellness. And she's going to tell us a little bit about herself, and then we'll get into it like we usually do.
Wonderful. Thank you for
Thank
having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I have a background in entertainment. I'm a voice talent and a comic. And so usually what comes along with when you're talent, you have to wait for the phone to ring. So when I was diagnosed with celiac in 2002, which the only known treatment of that is just to go gluten free, and in 2002 there were hardly any gluten-free there were a few gluten-free products. There was an end cap at Whole Foods that had like bags of $17 cookies, and that was $2002. So it was a lot of money to try to eat gluten-free. And I was going through what I now like to call the temper tantrum, when people find out that they can't eat certain things or they have a food allergy or an intolerance or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The temper tantrum is real, right? You're like, oh, I want to just, and I bought a bag of expensive cookies and they tasted so bad and the texture was so bad. I made a vow. That was my Gone with the Wind Tara moment, where I was like, I vow to make delicious gluten-free food. And being the Menchie person that I am, I wanted to blog about it and give the recipes out. So, coming up with my own flour blends and trying to figure out, how to do things dairy free or egg free, because everybody has we all have a
Yeah.
panoply of where we are on the spectrum
Yeah.
of food
Uh-huh.
intolerances.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
was blogging in my free time, and then something happened, which I think was a combination of just kind of getting older, as well as eating a tremendous amount of carbs, because when you're
Mm.
cooking gluten-free baked goods, you literally
Mm.
pound for pound are eating more carbs than you did when you were having gluten stuff. Not to
Yeah.
mention the fact that when I was celiac, I was the proof that when you're thin doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy, because I was rail thin because I hadn't digested a single nutrient in my entire life. So there's that. They call
Yeah.
it failure to thrive now, but we didn't have that, and they wouldn't say that for a
Yeah.
28-year-old woman. They'd be like, "Oh, you're thin, girl. You should be happy." That's the cultural message we receive, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
So in 2012, a friend of mine, Vinny Tortorich, he came to me and he said, I hear you produce podcasts, which was true. I was producing podcasts. I have a book and they told me I needed a podcast and you should produce it. And I was like, no, that's a lot of work, but thanks. And he said, do me a favor, read my book. His book's called Fitness Confidential, a little plug for Vinny's book. And I read the
Uh-huh.
book and it was so good that I was like, all right. And for some reason I said yes to this guy. And we wound up podcasting. And so his angle is, and he's a trainer to the stars, but he wanted to get into just helping regular people, because,
Uh-huh.
stars have enough. They're fine. The stars are fine. Celebrities are just fine. They don't need more help. Um, he wanted to help everyday people because of the obesity problem that's happening in this country. And
Wow.
his angle is,
Mm.
he calls it NSNG, no sugars, no grains. So he took what
Mm.
I was doing with the gluten free and taking it one step further. And I was like, well, hold on. I thought I was being healthy by eating gluten free. And he's like, well, you are for your body, but you're also putting on weight. And when you put on weight, that's oftentimes a side effect of your body saying, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. What are you doing? So I
Yeah.
changed the whole focus of my blog to being, I guess you would call it low carb. I guess keto is a hot
Mm.
word right now, but I have big problem with that word.
Yeah.
But sugar
Yeah.
and grain free. And
Uh-huh.
so I came out with my first cookbook in 2016, second one in 2019. I just turned in the manuscript for the third one.
All
And
right.
then figured out I needed to launch a sauce and spice company. So it's all kind of grown out of
Huh.
my reluctant yes to Vinny in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are today. That's my long bio, a very long bio.
Oh, no, I didn't. Actually, I thought it was kind of short.
Okay, good.
So, well, that's great. So let's see. Eat happy and eat happy too.
Correct.
I love those. I love those titles. Um,
Well, I named them
So,
Eat Happy, if I could interject for a second. I named them Eat Happy
uh-huh.
because my mother, who she was diagnosed with celiac first, and then they said it's hereditary. And I was like, oh, I don't have it. I don't have that. I
Yes, you
take
do.
after my father. I don't have it.
Yeah, right.
Sure,
I know. Don't
sure
you
enough, I
love
did.
that?
Well, she always suffered horribly from bipolar depression, which is one of the main
Ah,
depression's one of the
yes,
main symptoms of
yes,
celiac.
yes, yes. My mom had
She
that
was
too.
yeah, she was a sugar addict. And
Mhm.
I noticed when I changed and got the sugars and grains out of my diet, for the most part, by the way, I still eat sugars and grains. By the way,
Mhm.
100% of people eat sugars and grains again. I want to be really clear that I'm not like a black and white binary. You can never have that
Right.
food
Yeah.
again.
No. No.
Right.
Me neither. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But for the most part, when
Yeah.
I made that shift and added in the
Mhm.
fats and took away the carbs, my
Mhm.
brain chemistry shifted for the better. And it was not
Mhm.
something I could help my mom with, unfortunately. She passed away in
Mm.
2014, and I'm glad I got to be
Mm.
there. But her body basically had systemic organ failure from an infection, and it wasn't strong enough to fight it because she had, unbeknownst to her, decimated her organs through a sugar addiction. And
Wow.
it was obviously a tough thing to watch and experience, but it
Yeah.
was a motivator for me to like, hey, let's take that menschy part of yourself and really get that word out about it, because we all know we all have a sugar addict in our lives. We
Yeah.
do. And maybe it's us, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Partly.
Yeah,
Partly.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
So that's why I call them Eat
yeah.
Happy.
No, I think that I love that. That's those are great titles. Um, yeah, I also love the fact that you're that it's organic and it's all checks off all the
Right.
all the boxes for me. Um, yeah, yeah, because I know just family wise, my mother had horrible allergies.
Right.
She was the kind who would walk into a store and she'd have an allergy reaction to the wax on the floor.
Right. The chemical, she would have severe chemical
Yeah,
reactions.
yeah,
Yep.
chemical, food, everything.
Scents or
Um,
fragrance too. That's another big trigger for
oh
people.
yeah, oh yeah, oh God, I can't stand being around any of that at all.
Yeah.
Um, 4 kids. My father had no allergies, no nothing bothered him.
Yeah.
Um, 4 kids, all 4 of us got her allergies. Different parts of her allergies, but some food, some
Yeah.
scents, some
Right.
other. But it is so amazing, all that
It is
family
real. I know
family
people
stuff.
want to
Yeah.
like write it off sometimes, but it is real. When my daughter was younger, probably like 7 or 8, she goes, she said to me, you know what? If you were a superhero, you'd be the sneeze, because I sneeze all the time because of allergies. Everything's like, oh, everything bothers me. It's gotten better
Uh-huh.
since changing my
Yeah.
diet, but it's still
Yeah,
there.
funny how that works, huh?
I know.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, absolutely. Yeah. I know the problem. I know the problem. For me, just as an aside, there are certain things that I cannot under any circumstances eat or ingest,
Right. And
right?
you know
Not a
that
lot of them.
because you've experimented, which I
Thank
advise
you.
people to do. Figure out,
Yeah.
because one person can have dairy and another person can't. One person can have nuts, another person can't. Nightshades, oligosaccharides, the onion garlic family, it's all,
Uh-huh.
everybody's different.
Oh yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. And um what is it? B1, I think it is. Um Not thiamine, the one that sounds like that. Anyways,
Niacin.
it's this thing that's in
I
it's the
don't know.
thing
I
that's
don't
in
know.
that's in hibiscus.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyways,
Are you allergic to
I
it?
thought, oh my God, I had a cup. I didn't even get the whole cup down and I could hardly breathe. It was just like someone was sitting on
Wow.
my chest.
So no
And so it's one
hibiscus
of
tea
those
for
things.
you.
No,
Who
no, no,
knew?
no. And they put this stuff in so many supplements, I can't tell you. But
Wow.
yeah,
You got to
yeah, it
really
was
read labels
interesting.
then.
Yeah, well, I was doing that anyways, but now I really got to read labels.
You
Yeah,
guys, if anybody's listening, read
yeah,
labels. Even if it's a thing you've bought 100 times before,
yeah.
I can't tell you the number of times formulas change, whether you're talking about supplements, any processed food, which by the way, I'm not saying processed food is bad. Processed food just means anything that has more than one ingredient. So pick it up, look at if it's your favorite mustard, your favorite mayo, or your favorite vitamin, pick it up and look at it before you put it in the thing. I'm telling you, they change stuff all the time.
Thank you. I think we just brought the biggest value to this whole podcast.
There's your tip of the day, folks.
Exactly.
You're welcome.
No, really, truly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's scary. It's very scary.
It is, because they don't have to let us know. It's up to you as the consumer to check it out, to make sure that that's the thing you can have. So something I learned too from manufacturing sauces and now spices is, you know, obviously there's the whole, you know, they put fillers and preservatives and, you know, anti-caking agents, anti-slip agents, you name it. They're putting just all sorts of stuff that they technically say, oh, well, you can eat it. As long as you label the major allergens like the wheat, dairy, soy, shellfish, fish, corn. I can't remember what they all are. So, but then there's people like you and me who, like, if something has xanthan gum, for example, for me, I can't tolerate it. It'll make me sick, but that's not a major allergen. But I want to make sure because you can switch out, let's say, arrowroot powder for xanthan gum, and that's fine. And another thing I learned, and this is what to me is really scary about the food industry and why I am full disclosure lady and I've spent 11 years building trust with my audience. So for example, let's say there is a jelly, right? Or a jam that you love, your favorite jelly, and it uses pectin, right? As the binder that makes it jelly. When the manufacturer goes to make the next batch, he's getting low, he's making his blueberry jam or jelly or whatever, and he can't get pectin because it's sold out, supply chain, blah, blah, blah. He can use xanthan gum, right? And switch it out. Well, xanthan gum is not considered one of the major allergies, so he can do that. And he has up to a year FDA regulations to change his label. So he can use his old labels and say pectin. I know.
Oh my God.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
I mean, as long as it's not, you know, if it's a nut or soy or wheat or dairy, that stuff's got to be disclosed. But if it's something like that, you can switch it out and use your label and then get your new labels. And the next time you make it, you'll probably use the new labels. But so I think for me, knowing this piece of information helped me feel less crazy on those times where I've purchased something that I thought was safe for me and it made me sick. You know, I'm like, oh, something like that must have happened.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know. And so I've had that happen as well. Yeah.
There's so much stuff. I mean, and I know a very popular topic is the olive oil being cut. You know, they're legally allowed to cut olive oil up to 40% with cheaper seed oils. So if you see like light olive oil or something that doesn't look like olive oil, it's because it's not. And things like that. And I've been crowing about this since 2011 when people thought I was crazy because I went to my friend's place in Puglia. He made the oil, and his husband, now he passed away, but his husband, widower, continues to make the oil that I use in my sauces. But he was like, you know, they cut your oil over there. And I was like, whatever, Paul. Paul's just trying to sell me his oil. I was like, I get it. You have nice Italian oil and we're dumb Americans with our dumb American oil. But he's like, no, they really do. The FDA allows you to cut it. And they, so then I did a bunch of research. I found not only can they cut it, they put deodorizers in it because oil goes rancid really quickly. They put chlorophyll in it so that it colorizes. Actually, chlorophyll is probably the least egregious because at least that's a natural substance to give it a color like olive oil. They put bleaches, deodorizers, things like that, because oil, unlike wine, you want young oil, right? So the fresher the oil is, the better it is, but it can turn rancid or go flabby, they say. And so they have to put chemicals in it, and you're like, and it's not on the label, and it's really upsetting. And so I think, you know, I say all this stuff not to scare people, but to go, it's time for us to all kind of take some responsibility and find out who our food producers are. And these little tiny companies like mine, but screw mine, you don't have to support mine, but like people in your state, in your neighborhood, in your, you know, whatever the rural area is where they're doing cool food stuff, support them. I think there's a lot of sticker shock with that. And I was like, and I've now learned it's because it's expensive to get nice, high quality food to the people. It's really cheap to get cheap cut fillered food to the people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're in big trouble in this country feeding a lot of people, feeding the masses the food that we're feeding them.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
You
I'm
know,
sure. Yeah. 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 Well, yeah, it just because it's not even just the physical side, which is bad enough, but there's the whole emotional and what it does to our brains,
oh yeah,
you know. And then they then they see people out there shooting people, and they go, why are they doing that? Well, probably if you go look at their diet, you're going to get started knowing why they're doing it. There's a lot of other,
of
a
course, yeah,
lot of other reasons, right? Not trying to minimize any of that, but part of that whole thing usually has to do as well with food, because if people can't afford to be buying good quality food, they're going to eat what they can get,
of course,
you
yeah.
know, and then they get addicted to it, right? And it just that's the scary part. You just don't even know.
Well, I mean, you can say, I think it's okay to generalize and say people who are happy and well adjusted don't go into shopping malls and shoot off guns.
That's true.
So,
That's
and
true.
part of being happy and well adjusted is the food component. Obviously, there's several other
Yeah.
components to it, but people are hurting, and the dietary stuff. And again, I guess I come back to the title of like, I notice, and again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I'm
Yeah.
just a
Yeah. Right.
lady
No,
who's
me
great at
neither.
writing recipes. That's it. But
Uh,
I will tell you, if you know, for me, my experience, what worked for me was taking the processed foods out as
yeah.
often as I can. And
Yeah.
it changed my brain chemistry for the better. And listen, I came up as an actor, a comic, and a voice talent. Like,
Mhm.
you have to have some level of screw up to go into that business. So it's okay. I own it. I own it. But
Uh,
you
uh.
know, all
Yeah.
good.
Well, having grown up in LA, I understand.
Oh yeah, you know, especially West LA. You've seen it all.
Oh yeah. No, no, absolutely. I mean, hell, there were some child actors that even went to my high school,
Oh,
you
I'm
know.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Interesting. Yeah. But we won't go there. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's yeah, and it's so interesting because it really isn't that difficult to create good food,
I mean, we
you
do
know?
have access mostly, unless you live in a food desert, which that's
Yeah.
something that I want to explore is being able to help out folks. I think a lot of people live in a food desert, but probably, if I'm guessing, most people who listen to this podcast don't live in a food desert. But
Yeah.
now things are becoming easier to obviously mail order or get stuff. However,
Hmm.
that's a place of privilege to be in, to be able to
Yes.
order nice food in the mail and have it delivered to your house. That's
Yeah.
not lost on me. So
Yeah.
but I always tell people, because I have audience members from all walks of life, and I always say, get the best that you can afford that's available to you.
Hmm.
That's all you can do,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And don't beat yourself up, and just, if you're
Right.
sticking to whole foods as much as possible, and it does suck that the grain lobby subsidizes all these processed food products.
Oh my
And
God.
I
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
that grass fed the farmers who are doing grass fed ruminant farming were subsidized so that we could have access to
Hmm.
that sort of meat, and not have it be
Hmm.
crazy expensive. However, I will say, when I first started this, and by the way, I'm not saying I'm a proponent. I don't, if you're a vegan, a vegetarian, or a meat eater,
No, no,
I
it's
just,
fine.
across all spectrums, we can all agree
Right.
that we want our food supply chain to be cleaned up. So,
Yes.
um, but when I first started, if you are a meat eater, nobody was doing grass fed. And if you got, it was like three
Mm.
times the price. now it's gone down, which is proof that if people go in that direction economically, if there's an economic opportunity, everything's economically driven, right? So if people see that, if they're like, wait a minute, what if we got into some regenerative farming? And then now there's so many more resources out there, and the farmers and the ranchers of the world out there, especially the indie guys, are working so hard to deliver us high quality products, and it's happening, but very slowly. And there's still, horrible factory farms and,
Oh my God. Yeah. No. And I mean, I'm the first to admit that where I live, I'm spoiled.
Oh yeah, me too.
Okay. Yeah. And the farmer's market is just down the street twice a week. Right.
Yep.
And and there's a grocery store with 2 stores that is totally organic.
Yep.
Everything they have in there is organic. So I'm spoiled.
Yeah, me too.
And
for sure.
and I'm spoiled because I can afford to buy it.
Right.
Buy it. I mean, there's still a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky that I have access to it and I can afford it.
Right.
And not everybody has both of those things.
Right.
But from days when I couldn't necessarily afford it and it wasn't quite so accessible, I know that you have to pick and choose.
Oh, definitely. And you have to maximize your dollar.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I think, at least when I was growing up, the behavior that was modeled by my mother and my grandmother they were the ones who were, especially my grandmother's generation. She was targeted as the generation of convenience and get a TV dinner. And isn't this great? And we can, you know what I mean? Like, and so it was so exciting for the convenience. And then you think to yourself, well, they wouldn't feed us bad food. Like,
they didn't know.
They didn't know that she was the generation that put Parquet and the squeeze bottle on everything. So if you cooked the corn, it had the Parquet. If you had a bread, you squeezed the Parquet.
Yeah.
And that was, at the time, Parquet. I don't even know if Parquet is still in business, but Parquet was partially hydrogenated or trans fat or whatever.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It was all, that's all it was.
Yeah. Like, that's right. I was going to say it was 100%. Yeah.
It was 100%
with a little coloring.
Trans fat. Yeah. With some yellow food coloring, yellow number 5, probably,
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, so then that's modeled to my mother, and then that's modeled to me. And so my mom was a single mom. She didn't have time to cook food. I would sit at home and watch Julia Child and the Frugal Gourmet on PBS and go, oh, I really want to cook something. So I actually learned how to cook from watching cooking shows as a kid and then working for a catering company. And when you cut 5,000 onions, you really get experience on cooking stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and I just I never really had real food growing up. My mom had a limited repertoire of things to cook, but she was busy working, and as well she should. She was trying to support me and get the household running. And I think that's a very typical story of a lot of folks now. And so what I'm finding with my audience are people like me who had to get back into the kitchen or go into the kitchen for the first time, who maybe did, because you'd be surprised, but everybody wants to talk about, oh, my grandmother, she taught me how to make this, that, and the other. I was like, my grandmother didn't know how to make anything. And God bless her, you know what I mean? But it was a different generation then. And the things too that we used to mock on. So the other side of my family, the Italian side, we used to mock, my grandparents came over from Italy. And when I was growing up, it was not cool to hang your clothes out on the clothesline. It was not cool to jar and can your food. It was not cool to have your own chickens with the eggs. It was not cool to do any of that. And now it's like, that's what everybody's starting to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody wants their own eggs. Everybody, especially eggs right now, are crazy expensive. Everybody wants to be canning their own food. Everybody wants to have a garden. Oh, the garden in the back was like embarrassing back then. Because it meant like, oh God, let's be American and eat the processed foods. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to have that change, I'm like, oh, now y'all are seeing the wisdom of the immigrant culture. Great.
Oh yeah.
Me too. Yeah. And I was like, wait, hold on. Let's do that. Hence my own sauces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know, and I know I was telling you a little bit about myself before we started
Yeah.
recording, but when I was, I think I was in my early 30s, I guess, when I got really, 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 really sick. And that's when I ended up going to an allergist, just because of, as I said before, my family's history with with things. And it was so interesting because at that point there were no the only place when I found out I was allergic to wheat and dairy, cows in particular,
Right.
um, and a list of other things. The only place I could find noodles that were not made out of wheat
Yeah.
was at the Japanese food store.
I was gonna say the Vietnamese has the rice vermicelli.
Yes,
Yeah, but the
exactly.
Japanese,
Yeah.
yeah, they would do
Uh-huh.
buckwheat noodles or yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, buckwheat and rice. They
Yep.
would do rice noodles. Yeah. So, I that's where I went because that was the only place. And luckily I lived right near the Asian
Right.
food stores and so made it real easy. Um, but people thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
My my now husband said to me many years later after this and said, it's a good thing that we had been together for a while before you developed all these allergies because I don't think I could have gone through it otherwise.
You know what? My daughter, who's now 23 and living in Rome, right before she left for college, she had a bunch of health Michigan stuff
Mm,
happen, right? And
hmm.
was ultimately diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And she's at the stage of
Oh, wow.
Hashimoto's where she's very thin. You know how Hashimoto's, and this isn't everybody's experience, but I've seen
Uh-huh.
what I've witnessed is you're super thin, super thin, super thin, and then you hit 35, and then all of a sudden you gain 40 pounds and you're hypothyroid. And that's when they figure out you have Hashimoto's when you've had it all along. And
Ah,
some people
okay.
have
Yeah.
Hashimoto's and they're super thin. Some people have it and they put their hypothyroid, so it was discovered, long story short, it was discovered, but, but she got the diet. And I'm laughing because it was such terrible timing. You have to laugh. The week before she left for college. So I at least had till I was 28 to figure out I had to be gluten free. She had figured it out at 18 going to college. And so I was like, I at least had the beer and pizza experience. I mean, it was completely unhealthy, but I at least had to have the junk food
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh man, but she is thriving because she found out earlier. She's
Yeah.
thriving in a way where it took me a much longer time. And then my mom was 58 when she was diagnosed. So it was like she
Mm,
never had that chance she kind of recovered
hmm.
going gluten free, but then she was still a sugar addict. So it's like
Um,
I'm glad that the kids are finding out at younger ages now because at least
hmm.
and
Yes.
also there's way more stuff on the market.
Yes.
And by the way, I'm not totally anti-processed foods. I'm glad there's a gluten-free pizza that you can get. I'm glad that
Yeah. Thank you.
Italy makes a rosa pomodoro gluten-free pizza crust that is so good that
Oh,
I
okay.
it's
I'll
not
have to
like I
look for that.
never want to have a regular pizza again. Of course I do. I want there to be innovation in
Yeah.
food. I want things to be created, but I want it to be done in a healthy and sustainable way. You want
That's
at
right.
least I want my little corner of the supply chain for my sauces and spices to be
Yes.
regenerative, to be supporting the farmers, and obviously to
Hmm.
taste good. And then I want full more disclosure in food labeling and what things will actually do to you if you eat them.
Thank you. Yes. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. It's yeah, all yes to all that.
Yes, yes, yes. Preach, honey.
Yeah, yeah, yes, exactly, exactly. No, and it's funny because just one more thing with my allergist, God love him. I don't even know if he's still around. Um, when we got my whole big long list, he said, "I can't help you. Go have a good life. Just um, don't eat those things that bother you, right?"
Right.
And and at that time he was so much on the fringes
Oh, I'm sure.
that he actually closed up his practice. He couldn't handle it anymore.
I was going to say, even to be an allergist back then was probably revolutionary.
Yeah, yeah. Well, especially his kind.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, my mother had been to allergists and gotten shots. I used to go
Right.
with her when I was little. You know, but yeah, I mean, he was such a wonderful,
That's
wonderful
amazing.
person. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a lesson, totally. Yeah. Now we've got all of these doctors that are, all on the fringes and all
We
the,
love it. Try it
yeah,
out. Why not?
yeah.
Sometimes I think too, it's good that we have a wide range of solutions because you never know where people
Mm-hmm.
are in their lives, and
That's it.
the
Thank
sort
you.
of solutions
Yeah,
they're looking for might be different. And I
I
always just
agree.
I'm offering out some stuff. You know what I mean? And if it's right for you, great. Come on in. We have a
Yeah.
community. We support, we talk. I'm very
Uh-huh.
interactive with the people as much as I can. And one thing
Uh-huh.
I did do, the sauce is in the past year, making the move into retail stores has been a complete time
Ah.
suck. And we'll see. It's
Oh, I
starting to
bet.
unfold, but like it's an interesting
Uh-huh.
thing trying to play the traditional grocery store game with making a
Yeah.
high quality product. So I'll come back on another time. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Oh,
pretty
no, exactly.
interesting to learn about like
Exactly.
how stuff gets on grocery store shelves. You'd be shocked. Yeah.
Oh no, I wouldn't. I
You
spent
wouldn't be
30
because
years working in supply chain. It wasn't even called supply chain then. It was,
Yeah.
it was, I'm drawing a blank now on the word, but anyways, yeah. Yeah. Supply
Logistics.
chain
Yeah.
logistics. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. 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 And even before that, it was called, it was a steamship company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we
So
got to get stuff somehow.
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Trucks, trains, and ships.
That's
There
right.
you
I
go.
don't think people knew when
I
the
knew
rail
them
strike
well.
was threatening a couple months ago. When the rail strike was threatening, I was like, no, because we wouldn't be able to get
Yeah.
some of our tomatoes. I know. And then it was averted. And I was like, I don't think America even knows the danger that was averted by that rail strike not happening, because our grocery
Yeah.
store shelves would have looked a lot different without
Yes.
the rail delivered food.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's when you start going to the local farmers market.
True.
Might have helped people.
That's true.
Who knew?
Who knew?
But anyways, well, okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you are have so much stuff out there in the world, your podcast and your
Yes.
foods and your books, and tell us a little bit more about those.
Well, I have the two cookbooks out, and here's where I'm a little different than some other folks. I don't put the calorie counts and macro counts with my recipes. And that can sometimes be an incendiary stance because
Okay.
I am trying to keep people away from diet mentality. So for me, coming up as an actor and always watching my weight and wanting to count calories, it was a little crazy making. And by a little crazy making, I mean it made me crazy, full on.
Yeah.
And the diet mentality for me was a lot of, if I just restrict enough, if I'm just good enough, if I behave good, which means restricting my food, counting, all that stuff, then I will be good and I will lose the weight. And to me, it was such a sick cycle that was making me sicker with, you can get borderline OCD, disordered eating, bad habits. That, by the way, if you're recognizing yourself in any of this, please talk to somebody who can help. So I don't put that stuff because I just use real food as my ingredients. And I still get a lot of kickback from people who want to count. And I'm like, I understand and I hear you, and everybody is where they are. Is that grammatically correct? I don't know.
Yeah.
People are where they are. And I get that. But I will say now, having done this eating real food cutting out processed sugars and grains for the most part and changing the way my body operates, the way that my brain chemistry is, you really do. Our bodies are amazingly capable of eating. And then when you're full, they say, well, I'm full, and you stop eating. So like a bag of potato chips, you'll never get the signal that you're full. You can eat that whole bag of potato chips and maybe something else a half an hour later, right? But if you're eating, if you're a vegetarian, let's say it's a bunch of vegetables with olive oil and avocado, or if you're a meat eater, you eat a nice juicy ribeye. So you have a higher fat thing. You can't eat more of, you're done. Like I'm full, and,
Yeah.
so your hormonal system will literally respond positively eventually, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy at first, because number one, you physically have to get off of sugar. That's a physical addiction that's real and it exists. And you're going to have to figure out how to do that and be uncomfortable for probably 7 to 10 days. Okay. But in the grand scheme of things, if you can delay gratification for that period of time, what you get on the other side of it is so beneficial. Even right down to, and I make a joke in my first book about how I'm that a-hole at parties who's like, did you guys taste these cherries? They taste like candy. Because your palate changes. You literally will change the way you taste food. And and my friends are like, no, you know what tastes like candy? Candy. And I'm like, no, this fruit tastes so fresh. It's like candy.
Yeah.
But it really does. And then when you have a bite of something overly sweet, or you can see how much sugar masks the flavor of things, and it's very cloying. And I always say it feels like it punches you in your front teeth. Like you're like, like it gets you. So it's very important for me to stay solid as a voice of reason in this crazy diet community, because a lot of people find me through wanting to do low carb and keto. And I am here to say, it's not just a thing you're going to do for 4 to 6 months and then you stop. Like when you cut out processed foods, this is going to be your new understanding. You're going to have a paradigm shift. Plus, so that's the physical. Plus, then you get to see, and it happens every single time without exception. You white knuckle the physical stuff, right? And then you feel better. And then life happens. Something crappy happens. Someone's an a-hole to you. You go through a breakup. You go through life happens to all of us. And then
you lose your job, whatever.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Then you start to feel feelings. And then you go, and this happens every single time without exception. You feel feelings and then you go, hold on. I used to use food to smash those feelings, smash them back in. And when you give up the processed foods, you're not using those processed foods to smash your feelings anymore. And oftentimes people have to you have to address your stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to come up. And so that's the point where I find people will go away and go on a bender. And then they come back. They're like, because they know physically, I've done the things, I've lost the weight, I can do it again. But now I'm going to come back to it and do the physical things, but also address the emotional and spiritual stuff. And that's fine. It's all part of the process.
Yeah.
It's all good. We're all figuring it out as we go along.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's my stuff. That's my philosophy behind everything. I want to just be a calm voice of reason. Here's some recipes. By the way, they're all delicious. I don't publish duds. That's another thing I learned in the food industry, in the recipe writing industry. And, they just slapdash together. And I'm like, no, I test my recipes. And that was because before I did my first book, I had a book agent who I didn't wind up working with, who told me, why would anybody buy your cookbook? Who are you? And I was like, oh, okay. I get that, even though that hurts to hear it. So I'm going to make sure that everything I put out there is good, because then you can't get me on that. So sure, you might not know who the heck I am, but my recipes are good. So I did that. And then I had a listener call me, and he said he lost 80 pounds cooking out of my books, and he's a food manufacturer and he wanted to get away from producing so much processed foods. So we took some time and we developed the sauces, and he was my first manufacturer and made a gorgeous product. And because I wanted it to taste like how I made my sauces. And I also had to do a sales job on myself, because I was like, doesn't everybody make their marinara from scratch every time? because that's what I do. That's what I've done
No.
for 30 years. And apparently not. So if you're going to buy
No.
the jarred sauce, gotta get a nice jarred sauce. That's all.
Yeah.
So then it turned into my spice blends. Then it turned, because the spice world is insane how much stuff they sneak into spices. So it's all kind of growing. And then we're
Mm.
launching dressings soon, because I'm sure, as you know, dressings have a lot of soybean
Ah.
oil, corn oil, sunflower,
Yes,
safflower,
yes, yes. That
the
I do, like salad dressing and stuff
yeah.
and other kinds of, yeah, yeah. That
Again, I
salad
make my
dressing I
own
make
salad
myself.
dressing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
always
do
do.
I.
But
Yeah.
apparently a lot of people don't, and they would like to have salad dressing with olive oil, which I'm going to provide. But I want people to know, why they use soybean oil and corn? Because it's cheap. Canola oil, cheap. Also inflammatory. Very not good. But
Oh my God,
so
yeah. Yeah.
so I'm just gonna keep wherever I can come up with shelf stable stuff. I'm gonna do it because I
Hmm.
want the nicest quality of that stuff to be available. Like I was looking at prepared horseradish the other day. I love
Hmm.
horseradish. I love it so much. I'll put it on everything. Um, try to find a horseradish that doesn't have a ton of preservatives. Now, what food manufacturers will then tell me is, well, okay, well, you try to make it without all the preservatives. And I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to figure it out.
And I'm sure you will. I'm
Or
very
I'll die
confident.
trying. I got to get my
No, I wouldn't take
horseradish.
it. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think you'd take it that far, but yeah.
I don't know. This business is crazy. It might kill me, but I'm enjoying it right now.
Yeah, well, you got your hands in a lot of different things, so that
Yeah.
makes it easy. Then you can,
Yeah,
when you get sick of doing this, you can do that for a little while, and
exactly.
yeah. Hmm.
So yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's me.
yeah, for sure. That's great. So where are all of your things available? I mean,
Well,
are
thank you
they
for
like mail
asking,
order or are
Susan. Yes.
they?
So we are in retailers in SoCal. And if you go to eathappykitchen.com, if you want
Hmm.
our products, I also have a form you can fill out that says suggest a grocer, because, and we do, everybody who fills out that form, Megan, who's my
Uh-huh.
right hand, and we call those stores. We're like, hey, who's your buyer? Can we send you samples? Like we move on all that
Uh-huh.
stuff. So we are in, but you can also order DTC. That's the phrase. DTC, direct to consumer at eathappykitchen.com. We have
Ah,
everything for sale there. And then I have PDFs of the cookbooks there, but you can also get the hardcover cookbooks at, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those places. The places where you get the books. Yeah.
okay. I'm just looking to see if I had your huh. They didn't give me your website.
Eathappykitchen.com is probably the best one. I also have a
Okay.
Substack newsletter where that's where I'm printing all of my, publishing all of my new recipes, with the exception of what's coming out in the next book. But annavicino.substack.com. I'm all over the internet. Say hi.
Just do a Google on you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do the Google.
Go. Yeah, there we go. That's
Exactly.
great. Yeah, because I like putting, all the links and stuff
Oh yeah, in the show notes. I
in the
think
show
people who,
notes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know I'm that way. When I hear somebody on a podcast, I'm like, oh, where are they? And I look in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so that's so exciting. I'm gonna have to follow up and find some of your sauces. And no doubt there's probably something in them that I'll be allergic to. But my husband will be
Maybe
fine because he can eat
he can eat
everything.
anything. I see. I'm married to one of
Uh-huh.
those as well.
Yeah.
So Vinny, my podcast co-host, he has NSNG, no sugars, no grains, and that's the philosophy that I adhere to. But my husband, I always joke, is ASAG, all sugars, all grains. And he's also by the way, also too, genetics plays a huge part in stuff, because I'm married to
Oh
a
my
man where
God, yeah.
genetics are like, he's just like, looks like that. He looks like a football quarterback. Like he's just ripped.
Hmm.
He'll lift like a little bit of weights and he decide I'm not going to have ice cream for 3 days. And all of a sudden he has a 6 pack and you're like, that's not fair. And it isn't. But some people
That's
have
right. And
genetics on
that's
their
life.
side. That's right.
And that's life. Yes.
They'll
Yes.
be 20 to 30% of the population that can eat whatever sugar they want and still be pretty fit looking, and they can process it, and that's fine. But for the rest of us who
Mhm.
can't do that, we just have
Yeah.
to own the fact that our bodies weren't built
That's
that
right.
way. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we can wrap up. Otherwise, we'll be here for another hour.
That's
I'm
right.
sure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Which we will do at a later time.
Yes.
So, okay, so let me do my usual little spiel here, which is that, I am not a doctor, and actually neither of us are doctors, and this is not to be seen as medical advice. If you are having physical issues, please go and see your doctor or find a good doctor for yourself, or go to the emergency room if it's an emergency. And with that, I will. That's such a funny look on your face.
I mean,
will
if it's an
say,
emergency, guys, go to the emergency room. No brainer.
I know, well, you would think, but it's always nice to say it and take the responsibility off of me. And so with that, I will say goodbye and thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.